slab. Go. There's a video of an individual that was doing a social experiment, and I came across it a couple of years ago. Just really is fascinating. What he did was this: he had a suit on, and he taped dollar bills all around him, on the front of his suit, the back of his suit, and he held a sign that simply read this: "Take what you need." And he would go into the biggest city in our country, New York City. Who took advantage of that, you think? Would it be the homeless? Would it be those that don't have much? The people didn't know there was a camera on them, and it was amazing. One guy in a nice suit came up, and he started pulling dollar bills. He says, "Do you actually need this?" He goes, "No, but it's free money." As he goes a little bit further, time progresses. There's a woman with a nice, expensive purse, and she's taking stuff. He says, "Do you really need this?" And she says, "Yeah, I have a nail appointment in the next couple of days." And then as he goes into a park, there's a homeless man that notices him. You could tell because he's dressing in dirty clothes. There's not much he has. And he goes up to the man and he asks if he can only have $2. That's it. No more. The others just grabbed what they wanted. They didn't stop. They didn't have an idea of a number. They just grabbed because it was free. He asked for $2. And the man that was doing the experiment was so overwhelmed. Why did you only get $2? He says, "That's all I need." And he was so overwhelmed that he gave the man enough to care for the dog, and as well as to get him something to eat even more. The video really portrayed this: the more that we get, it seems like the more that we need. Some of the people that really didn't need it just got it because they feel like they could need it later on as they saw as need. And those that didn't have much didn't really need a whole lot. And to me, from that experiment was this beauty in brokenness. It reminds us this past year of going into the homeless camps and setting up a meal for them and realizing that the people there just appreciate what you do. They're not asking us, "Hey, how much money do you have?" Not one person asked, "How much money do you have? Can you spare me some dollars? I'm really short." No one asked that. They all were thankful for what they got. They didn't ask for more in that setting. It reminds me of people throughout the Bible and the beauty that we could see in their vulnerable situations, and as they're being very much exposed to us from the biblical perspective, and as we examine them from the Scriptures, we really see their brokenness. And in that brokenness, there's a sense of beauty with that. Beauty, what God is able to do for us, despite the things that we have done. It's a universal lesson that no matter how far you have gone, that if we're willing to come to God, God is willing to forgive. And that transcends beyond culture, beyond time, beyond different dispensations, to all of us, and we can all relate to that. In John chapter 4, it tells us in verse 4 that Jesus needed to go to Samaria. Now, if you were from Galilee and you needed to get to Jerusalem, you could go the short way, which is through Samaria, or you can go all the way around it. And that's exactly what most Jewish people did. They bypassed the region of Samaria because of the prejudice, if I might say, between the Jews and the Samaritans. They didn't like each other. They despised one another. And there was a tremendous amount of animosity towards one another. And so for any traveler, they would make sure that they would travel around Jewish traveler outside and not go there. But John tells us that Jesus needed to go to Samaria. That's not a typo. That's not a mistake by John in putting that there. Jesus needed to go through there because Jesus was the Savior for the world. And we need to understand that. He arrived around noon, at the heat of the day, hot part of the day, and he came to a well, Jacob's well, to sit down there. and rest while his disciples went to go get some food in the nearby town. It was an unusual time and an unusual place to meet someone at that particular time. When I was in Africa, that it was a dry season, and when they say dry season, they're not kidding. It is dusty. It is kind of a dry heat to it, and water is not abundant at all. And so for people to get water, it would be naturally either at the cool of the day at evening or at the very early part of the day. Very rarely, if not at all, would you see anybody right in the smack dab middle of the day going into the hottest part, towards the hottest part, to get some water. People were smart enough to know the day, the temp, what to do, when to do it. So most people would get their water in the morning or in the evening, but she went at day. Why do you think that she went at day? Because of, as we will see, who she was. Because of her character, because of her brokenness, because of her reputation, if you will. And yet Jesus knew that in this situation that something beautiful would happen. He asked her for something to drink. Will you give me something to drink? He was thirsty. But what I love about that is this, the humanity side of Jesus. You know, God being thirsty. Again, God in the flesh. Jesus thirst. He would say it again while on the cross, I thirst. So here he asked her to give him something to drink, and she's totally shocked by it. She knows him being a Jewish man. How could you, being a Jewish man, asking me, a Samaritan woman, to give you something to drink? That's probably never has happened to her in her life. Probably. And so she is being offered something. She doesn't know how to respond, but Jesus goes a little bit further, offering her something of water that she will never thirst again. That sounds good in the heat of the day if your mind is on physical things. But Jesus is more direct with her, isn't he? He doesn't just talk to her and just, just avoid the conflicts and avoid the, what's the saying, the gorilla in the room, that everyone knows that it's a problem, but no one's willing to address it. He doesn't do that. He addresses her mess and the situations that she has come into. And he doesn't politely pretend that everything is okay. I'm just going to avoid the situation. I'm going to smile and go on with my life, because that's not why he came. He came to seek and save that which is lost. And she needed Jesus. And I ask myself when I read this, would Jesus say any hard truth, tough love to me? To any of us? Your short temper is keeping you on the edge. You're really looking at that person that you're working with, and you're forgetting the ring on your finger, and if you're not careful, that's going to lead you into trouble. You're dating this person really doesn't have an interest in God, and you somehow think that you're going to win this person, and just by getting married, that person's going to... What would he say? What would he say to us if he was open and honest and we can have that conversation? Jesus speaking some difficult truths. The first point I want to share with you is this: the bitterness from our brokenness. Many false assumptions the woman made about Jesus. Number one is she didn't know what he was talking about. The water that I give you, living water, you will never thirst again. She was focused on the physical things. But again, going back to her question to Jesus, how is it that you, being a Jewish man, talking to me, asking me, a Samaritan woman, to get something to drink? Let me what I think. Why are you talking to me? I didn't think you want nothing to do with me. Does Jesus want nothing to do with me? If we think that Jesus has no interest in us, it's a good chance that we don't have any interest in him. Because we really don't know him, do we? That's far from the truth and what Jesus has done and what Jesus continues to be. He's very interested in us. Maybe we think, and some people get in a broken state, well, God's love just doesn't cover me. His mercy, His grace isn't for me. And feeling rejected is really one of the worst things we can feel in life, that people feel, whether young or old, that nobody likes me, that nobody accepts me, and feeling that we are rejected by the world, we're rejected by the people that we love. And it's easy that when we're rejected that we build these emotional walls up, and when we don't let people into our lives because we've been hurt by people that we trusted, that we open ourselves to, and they went against that trust. They broke that trust. So how can I be open to someone else? Given this woman's history with husbands, having many husbands, that she was careful at this point in time to be putting herself in a very vulnerable position. But Jesus went out of his way to really meet this woman. He was wanting to be there for that reason, to transform her. And as was read to us by Jerry, as she was from this situation because of Jesus, as other Samaritans do about Jesus, and not just because of what she said, but because of his reputation and his example. And many of them believed, which is interesting for us to consider, considering that many people, Jesus is Jewish, coming for the Jews, when also he came for the world, loving the world. There's another assumption that maybe as she goes into to get the awkwardness away, she jumps into the subject of worship and the concept of worship, and Jesus goes there a little bit, but to me this assumption is that Jesus is more interested in religion than me. She tries to distract him by talking about that. She wants to avoid the encounter of what the truth really is, and she wants to maybe engage in religious conversation. And do we as a church, do we get caught up in the debates and the conversations and forget about what the really desperate need is? I learned that the hard way in starting out as a minister. I would go and visit with people and try to study with them. And instead of studying on one thing, we would jump around and look at 50 things. And I would leave just as confused as them because we didn't get anywhere. I got distracted. I allowed them to distract me. When they were getting closer and closer to seeing what the Word says, that went against to what they thought, they would go and ask something else to get us off in another tangent. It's so human nature, isn't it? When we know that it applies to us, when we know that what God is saying is pertaining to me, when we know that the message that's being presented today applies to me today, check. Look around, hey, is it someone else that needs it? We don't want to put ourselves in an open situation to where we feel like that we are the only ones that are exposed. We can feel like this woman when we feel like that God is too personal. God is too much involved in such a way that we want our time, if we feel like, to be just our time and not with Him when we're in sinful situations. She falsely assumed that Jesus was more interested in talking about the religion and worship than about what she was going on and what she was going through. But she would quickly find out that Jesus was about seeking and saving that which is lost. Jesus was about mending the brokenness that we have created as people in this life. Another assumption that we see is this: the offer that you're making is too good to be true. You know the saying, if it's too good to be true, then what? It's too good to be true. I wonder if people that are without a relationship with Jesus, if they actually think that. Because unfortunately, the bad examples, the bad apples that are out there in the name of religion, the name of Christianity, that have taken that away. If they keep their guard up, they say, no, there's got to be a catch to it. There's got to be something to what you're offering about Jesus, what He has done for us. There's got to be something that I've got to do. And so when you think about that, knowing your track record with relationships, it always, and again, I'm not pointing at anyone. But again, when you think about divorce, whether it's scriptural or non-scriptural, a divorce is to end a relationship. And for some, especially trivial divorces, we're not getting along, we're not doing this or that, it's not working out, we're not meshing, whatever, and they get a divorce, and that happens a lot. And to me, I think to myself, I don't know all the situations, but think about this point. If we want to get better at a relationship, why would we end a relationship? She had ended, as well as others, had ended many relationships. And she had gone through that so many times that she was just living with someone. She didn't get married. She was living with that person. I want you to think about it. She had opened herself up, and she had invited someone into her life, and vice versa in the marriage, and it didn't work out. I don't know what happened. I don't know what the situation, or we're not told why they divorced whatsoever. But that many times, to me, would say that with those, not just putting her down, but looking at all those involved, there's a problem with relationships, isn't there? And so it's not surprising that maybe she has her guard up, that maybe she's thinking that I can't trust men because of me getting burned or whatever happened in previous marriages. Maybe what he's promises is too good to be true. Whatever false assumptions about Jesus, the gift that he offers her, the assumptions were really hurting her, not hurting Jesus. What they were doing is they were keeping her away from embracing the moment even more with why Jesus was there and talking to her. If you look at verse 25 of John 4, she says, Messiah is coming. And when he comes, he will tell all things. See, she hadn't connected the dots fully together. And I don't blame her, because the disciples struggled years to connect dots. And here she had this one moment. I love what Jesus says, I am he who you speak of. The one that is to come, I am him. And so as we see this bitterness and this exposing this and these false assumptions from her, and from her a different perspective to where Jesus, what he's trying to bring to her and to connect to her and to show her the need that she needs, what he's offering her is far more valuable than anything that she can think of. And we can't help but think that surface level, that she's offering physical, considering the time of day, considering why he's talking to me. But what he was offering was of himself, wasn't it? He was the Christ, the Messiah, the living water, the bread of life. And we go into, to me, the second point, the beauty in brokenness. When our truth in our own life is hard to face, it's hard to imagine that we can be forgiven. It's hard. And I know for those of us who've accepted God's forgiveness, we just can't see that. But when you spend time with people that just have a terrible past, they have that skeleton in their closet, it's almost like that this thing that's become big in their lives over time is bigger than what God has done for them. As wrong of a thought that is, it's still there in a lot of people. That I've gone past the point of God forgiving me, of God helping me. I'm so broken in life. I've failed so many people. I've disappointed the people that I love. I've done all these things. How can I be forgiven? That's a hard thing for many people. A lot of people have buried their deepest things in their minds, in their souls. Being humiliated if it came out, exposing themselves. But that's not the worst thing. The worst thing for us is to go through life and realize that God doesn't care. That God's people doesn't care. That no one will find out, and you carry that weight of guilt and shame. and you try to outrun God. And we saw where that got Adam and Eve. They didn't get very far, did they? In hiding from God. You can't hide from God. You can't outrun God. And that's an awful thing that many people do. The woman broken from bad relationships left Jesus that day. She left Jesus changed. And to me, in being a Christian and serving and going out and doing all these things and hearing the no's and hearing the rejections and hearing people that are not interested and watching a life that has changed, it's all worth it. It's all worth it. A life was changed. She was changed. Jesus revealing who He was and is in His conversation, in His dialogue with her, breaking all barriers socially. A man talking to a woman at day, but a Jewish man, a rabbi talking to a Samaritan woman who was living with someone. How taboo that was, especially in that day and time. A changed life. When I read John 4, when I consider what Jesus and how He talks to her, how He deals with her, and how she just kind of moves like molding clay, and you see in life today, it really takes us being broken, doesn't it, to appreciate what God has done for us. To appreciate that. One of my first funerals as a preacher in West Tennessee was a woman who kept literally everything. Her car was an antique and only had 20-something thousand miles. She didn't take it out anywhere. She was also a person that grew up in the Great Depression. And as a child growing up in that and seeing her family go through that and not having anything and scavenging, she held everything. Now, I've studied it. I've studied in history, in class, in school, but I haven't experienced it. It's different when you experience it, isn't it? And it does something. When you think about us that, maybe we really haven't struggled with a lot of things. Maybe we were brought up in good homes. We were brought up in where there's a mother and there's a father, and they loved us and they cared for us, and they brought us to worship service. I mean, that may be a lot of us, but that's not the majority, folks. There's a lot of homes where the parents are not together. There's a lot of homes where they're not bringing their children anywhere near God and His church. They're carrying them to a lot of other places. Horrible things. Terrible things. They too will get older. What will become of them? Are they hopeless? Is there no hope for them? You see, John 4 reminds me that regardless of the things that have happened to us, regardless of the things that we have chosen, it's not too late if we take the opportunity that we are given with the gospel, with the message that's presented to us. Some of the hardest things is understanding that I need Jesus and I need my brokenness to be exposed to Him to understand just the amount of depth of love that God has shown and displayed and done for you and me. She literally runs home and she does what? She does the definition of evangelizing. She spreads, she talks about Him, she shares it. Wait a minute, this is a woman that went at the well at daytime when no one else was going there. This is a woman that had multiple husbands and she's now living with a person. Now she's going and telling others about it. That's the beauty of the gospel. That's the beauty of a changed life. She knew and understood as what Jesus knew. He knows everything you ever did, but He wants to make sure that you know that His grace, His love is much greater. Oh, if we can get past our thoughts, if we can get past the guards and the barriers that we put up to block ourselves from really reaching the depths of God's love and forgiveness, to fully appreciate and understand it, as this hymn appropriately that we sung this morning says, just as I am. Not as someone else, not as what people think of me, not what I portray on the internet of how I am, but as I really am. That's the God we serve. And that's the God that loves us. And so I would challenge us all to understand that there is beauty in brokenness. There is beauty in a life that has experienced horrible things, and to see them being transformed, not because of a person, not because of anything that we think of on our own, but because of God and what God is able to do. And that is the gospel. That is the glory of the gospel. And that is to build upon this morning, that while we should not ever lose heart or give up in sharing the news, in doing good things, in reaching to others, no matter how broken they may be, because Jesus shows us that. Jesus demonstrates that. Those who are well have no need of physician, but I've come to those who are sick. Broken. Now, this holiday season, a lot of people pretend like their lives are put together. A lot of people are going to pretend like life is good and everything is fine, but inside they are hurting. They are broken. They feel lost. They feel despair. And they don't feel like there's no hope. Now, no one, God hasn't told them that, but life has told them that. And people have, through experiences, have shown them that. And one of the lights that we can do as God's people is to generate a positive influence, not only among ourselves, but in this community, in hopes that one of us, or one of our other congregations nearby, that we could all reach those people that feel like that there is no hope for them. Because that is a terrible place to be. This Christmas season won't change that. Birthdays, anniversaries, vacations won't change that. The only thing that changes that is our relationship in Jesus Christ. And we can only do that as we come just as we are to Him. And embrace Him and accept Him and what He has done for us. This is a good reminder for all of us to understand the call that we're called, to understand our own transformation and conversion, to understand how God has forgiven us, and to understand that there are others that are hurting, and there are those that need Jesus just as much as we needed Jesus, and to do our best to reach them. Not just pray for them, to reach them, and to do what we can. If we all do a part, if we all work together, imagine what God can do according to His power that is at work within us. It's a powerful verse, isn't it? That applies to us here at Charlotte Heights. Sam has selected the appropriate psalm. We're going to stand and sing, and if we can help you putting on Christ, rededicating your life, asking for forgiveness, knowing that God will forgive you. But here's the hard thing: you've got to forgive yourself. And I think forgiveness takes time. That's another lesson. But I also think that we too can find encouragement. We don't just can come forward because we've sinned and fallen short in a public way. We can come and say, you know what, I just need strength, I need prayers, I need wisdom, I need to be more courageous and not be afraid. I don't need to be ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's the power of God is salvation. The invitations for us all that Jesus invites us all to come as together we all stand and sing.